You're listening to In Good Health from Radio Health Journal, the trusted news source for medicine, science, and technology. I'm Elizabeth Westfield.
I'm Mayan Vasta Betancourt.
And I'm Greg Johnson. This week, a novel treatment for blood cancers.
Not only is it different because it's a cell, but it's also a medicine that is given only once because cells are alive and their job is to fight the cancer.
But first, can an AI therapist actually be helpful?
Our goal is never to reduce human connection that folks have, but I think there are a lot of people out there who are not, either don't have access to a therapist, are afraid to go see a therapist.
All that and more this week on In Good Health. Artificial intelligence has made its way into nearly every field in healthcare. It seemed to be helpful across the board, from aiding in more precise surgeries to fostering better patient-physician relationships. And though many of these advancements have been welcomed with open arms, one area that still seems to have some pushback utilizing AI is therapy. There's a lot of public worry about getting mental health treatment from a computer. But despite these concerns, researchers have been working on the best way to integrate the technology into this field. Dr. Michael Heinz is a research psychiatrist at Dartmouth Geisel School of Medicine. He's part of a team dedicated to developing AI therapy tools to help treat mental health disorders. They've been working on a chatbot called Therabot for the last 6 years, trying to make the most effective product for various mental illnesses.
We have over 100 people on this team over the 6 years we've been developing it. So we have a lot of different people who have a lot of different ideas and input. We're currently running trials where we're actually working with what are called sort of experts by experience. So people who are dealing with the conditions that we're interested in treating. And so we're taking input from both kind of experts on our team and from real people with the conditions to try to come up with what content areas are going to be the most helpful, most fruitful.
There are many different types of therapy and approaches to choose from. Heinz says that they've mostly trained Therabot on cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as additional techniques that focus on mindfulness, acceptance, and compassion.
So it's really using the treatments that are the most evidence-based that we have in therapy. So it's using also acceptance and commitment therapy is something else we've worked a lot with in developing Therabot. Dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT, is another one that we've tried to train Therabot on. That one is one that's really skills-based work in DBT that can help folks with, like, in crisis situations, can help them with distress tolerance, can help them with sort of it's very practical. It can help them with sort of interpersonal challenges and things like that.
So far, the team has trained it to work with conditions like depression, anxiety, and personality disorders.
And so we're kind of taking those core concepts that we think are really important, and we've had experts on our team in mental health really review these materials, or sort of review the types of therapy we're training Therabot with and figure out kind of what are the best evidence-based practices we can use. So we're using really those kind of core CBT, DBT, ACT, and we're using core principles from those across different disorders.
They conducted the first ever clinical trial of a generative AI therapy chatbot earlier this year, publishing the results in the New England Journal of Medicine AI. The research involved more than 200 adults who either had anxiety, depression, or were at a clinically high risk for eating disorders. Participants were randomly placed into two groups, one that would interact with Therabot and the other that would serve as a control group with no therapy exposure.
What we saw was clinically and statistically significant reductions at 4 weeks in the treatment Therabot group compared to the control group. And we saw that those just got bigger. Those differences actually just got bigger. This was really exciting when we got to the follow-up period at 8 weeks. So that was evidence that these benefits that folks found were actually sustained past the 4 weeks up to 8 weeks.
Heinz says most of the participants interacted with Therabot on a daily basis through text messages. The average use was more than 6 hours over the course of the trial. And though the goal is for this technology to be used independently, the team is still monitoring every interaction while it's in the testing phase.
We're only using Therabot still in clinical trial settings. So we still have a human in the loop who's monitoring the interactions. What I will say, though, is Therabot does really well. This isn't something where we're jumping in at any regular frequency. Therabot does really well on its own and works pretty autonomously. But given that we're still testing it, it's still in clinical research, we do have human experts in the loop.
Overall, Therabot users experienced a significant reduction in symptoms over the 8-week trial. And though this is compared to the control group that wasn't receiving any therapy, Heinz says that it's a major win, especially when considering that in the real world, many people don't have access to mental health resources.
The magnitude of how much improvement folks had was comparable to many established psychiatric treatments, including in-person therapy that we saw, because it's fairly standard. Many different treatments, when they're first being tested, will be compared to a wait list control or something, kind of an inactive control, just to get a sense of, is this thing that I'm hoping to deliver to patients at least better than sort of the normal? I guess it really reflects reality. It's when you don't have treatment, most people don't have treatment and their symptoms go untreated. And is this thing that we're hoping to test at least better than that? And so we can compare those effect sizes to other treatments that are now standard treatments in the field. And those effect sizes are right on par, if not better, than what we see from both psychotherapy and medication treatments. So things like SSRIs actually have effect sizes that are on average not as good as what we saw in the Therabot trial.
Not only did they have a reduction in symptoms, but the team noticed that the participants experienced secondary effects that are important in therapy, like the patient-therapist relationship. They measured these non-specific outcomes using what's called a working alliance inventory, which is often used in conventional therapy settings.
And so we gave that same inventory to our patients, to our clinical research subjects in the study, and folks rated it on par with the way that people have rated alliance with real therapists in an outpatient setting. So we actually saw people really feel that they built an alliance with Therabot. And that alliance is kind of a term for something that's often measured in research, in psychotherapy research, and it looks at factors like shared goals in therapy, feeling a bond with a therapist. And we know that alliance is something also really important in therapy that predicts outcomes. So people who have a good alliance with their therapist, it might not be surprising, tend to have better outcomes. And so we saw that in the trial as well.
Despite these positive findings, there is still a fear within society of replacing human interactions with AI. What are the repercussions? Will it promote more isolation and reduce human connection? Heinz says this worry has been top of mind for him while developing and training Therabot.
I have so many thoughts about this. And I think one goal we have with Therabot is sort of meeting people where they're at. Our goal is never to reduce human connection that folks have, but I think there are a lot of people out there who are not, either don't have access to a therapist, are afraid to go see a therapist, people who may never have access, some people on wait lists, some people who may never have access, depending on where they live or what resources they have. And so I think of Therabot as kind of a way to meet a lot of people where they're at.
It also offers patients a unique space that may help them feel more comfortable than when speaking with a human. In fact, various surveys have estimated that between 70 and 90% of patients lie to their therapist.
A number of people say that they prefer talking about their kind of most personal stories with generative AI because there's not the sort of perceived judgment and stigma that can come when you're talking to a person.
Still, the rise of chatbot companions has created a worry that we will soon have generations dependent on and addicted to AI relationships. Thankfully, Heinz says that those artificial connections are the opposite of Therabot's purpose.
We start to have a breakdown of human-human interaction. I think our goal with Therabot is, our guiding star with it is mental health. And mental health means getting back out, for most people, means getting out into the world and engaging with other human beings. And so that's written into the very training data that we're using to train Therabot, is sort of not to engage people indefinitely in their homes in ongoing conversation forever, but it's to meet people where they're at and help them get back into their lives or help them find fulfillment that they're looking for in their lives.
With the success of their first trial, Heinz believes that Therabot will be available to the public sooner rather than later. Though they're still testing its safety and efficacy, he's optimistic that it will be used in the real world within a couple of years.
We're moving in directions toward looking at like FDA approval, which I think would open a lot of new doors for Therabot, and actually being able to once you have FDA approval, you can actually make valid claims about treatment. So saying this is actually indicated to treat certain disorders. So I see that. I know both Nick and I see that. Nick is the PI in the AIM High Lab at Dartmouth who's worked on Therabot. We've worked together for the last 6 years, Nick Jacobson. But I know that's a hope of ours, is to really make this available to everybody and have it be evidence-based and have it be something that can really meet people where they're at and be used for and make substantiated treatment claims that it can help with disorders like depression and anxiety and can actually treat those disorders.
The team will also be expanding Therabot to help other populations, like people with substance use disorders, where 24-hour access to help can make a huge impact. You can find more information about Dr. Michael Heinz and all of our guests on our website, ingoodhealthpodcast.org. For more behind the scenes, follow In Good Health Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and X. Our writer-producer is Kristen Farah. Our executive producer is Amira Zaveri. I'm Elizabeth Westfield.
In Good Health returns in just a moment. Many of us are familiar with the standard treatments for cancer, like chemotherapy and radiation. And while those are still widely used, scientists have been creating much more personalized forms of care that are, in many cases, much more effective than the usual therapies. One that's been in the works for decades is called chimeric antigen receptor T-cell therapy, more widely known as CAR T-cell therapy. Dr. Michel Sadelain, a pioneer of this research, says it's used to treat some types of blood cancers by teaching the body's immune system to fight off the disease. T cells are white blood cells in your immune system that help kill infected or cancerous cells. What this novel treatment does is it genetically modifies these immune cells to recognize specific molecules unique to the invading cancer so that it can more quickly find and kill the tumor.
They are cells, meaning they're alive. And the starting material comes from the patient himself or herself. So we collect these cells, which is very easily done because we all have immune cells, including T cells circulating in blood. So you just need to draw some blood to get T cells from the patient. They are then brought to a laboratory where they are processed to acquire this CAR molecule, and then they are reinfused. So not only is it different because it's a cell, but it's also a medicine that is given only once. Because cells are alive, they can divide, they can multiply, they can persist in the body for days, weeks, and even months, and sometimes years. And their job is to fight the cancer.
Sadelain is the director of the Initiative in Cell Engineering and Therapy at Columbia University. He and 3 other researchers were recently awarded the 2025 Merkin Prize in Biomedical Technology for their roles in pioneering this therapy. Though the treatment was first FDA approved in 2017, Sadelain's been working on CAR T-cell therapy since the 80s when he and other colleagues first developed it.
After obtaining a medical degree and then working at that time on a PhD in immunology, it occurred to me that perhaps we should teach our T cells to do what we would like those T cells to do. And for that, it would have to be a genetic order that we insert into those T cells. So then I had to become a genetic engineer. And so after my PhD in Canada, I went to MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts, to learn what was the beginnings of the science of gene transfer.
Gene transfer refers to the process of passing on genetic information. We do this naturally between parent and child during reproduction, but in medicine, it occurs when scientists modify living cells, then insert them into humans. In Sadelain's case, he used it to see if he could alter T cells to attack specific biomarkers found in cancer.
And once it started succeeding in these T cells, these cells of the immune system, we could really study these molecules, receptors that you would have to create to reprogram, repurpose, and target these T cells to fight cancers. And thanks to these methods for genetically modifying T cells, we could conduct a number of studies in the laboratory throughout the 90s into the early 2000s.
The team was able to identify a molecule called CD19 that's expressed by various types of leukemia and lymphoma cancers. After years of research, they were able to start testing their first patients in 2007. These patients had refractory leukemia, meaning that the cancer cells had stopped responding to all other treatments.
These therapies are approved once cancers have become resistant to all current or previously known treatments, the so-called refractory disease. So the disease is really bad by then. And in all the first trials that started testing these CAR T cells, those were patients who were going to die from their disease within months or maybe not much more than a year or so. So we're talking about assessing responses in patients who didn't have any hope anymore until the CAR T cells came around.
To this day, CAR T cells still aren't approved to be a first-line defense against cancer. The handful of approved products are still only allowed to be used for relapsed or refractory cancers.
The way new medicines are evaluated in the US is by starting with clinical trials that first enroll patients who have already received existing approved treatments. That's called the standard of care, and who are now failing with these treatments. So by definition, they have already received one or very often multiple treatments, and that means that their disease is also really advanced. So that's the starting point for clinical trials, and therefore, when these CAR T cells were approved, they were approved for those patients.
However, Sadolin believes it's only a matter of time before more patients will be able to utilize this therapy.
But that requires additional clinical studies where you have to compare this treatment to others that are already in use to be certain that it is better to give the treatment earlier. And this is happening, but it takes time.
Time and proof that this treatment is effective. Thankfully, Sadolin says CAR T cell therapy has already been shown to cause significant improvements for certain types of cancer.
The first metric is going into what's called complete remission, which is the cancer becoming undetectable. The doctors try to detect it using a vast different measurements. We don't call that a cure. We call that a complete remission because we know that there's maybe a few cancer cells left. It's just that we can't find them. So then you have to wait for a long time and see if the cancer comes back. So just to give you some examples, in refractory acute lymphoblastic leukemia, about 80% of patients will go into complete remission. And it seems like at least a third and close to half perhaps will have at least a very long complete remission. And after years, at that point, you can call it a cure. In forms of lymphoma, the durable complete remissions concerns perhaps even more patients. 60% of those that go into a complete remission may still be disease-free after many years.
Again, this is against a disease that's become completely resistant to chemotherapy and radiation.
Patients have undergone a number of these procedures and received a number of different treatments that no longer worked or perhaps never did work for those patients. A big difference is that the chemotherapy is kind of a poison that kills lots of cells. The goal is to kill cancer cells, but it does have numerous side effects, I think, that most people are familiar with. Whereas these CAR T cells are part of what is called precision medicine. They are targeted, like a missile that's targeted to recognize very specifically its target. And so this is why they are so attractive, because they can be efficacious while minimizing side effects.
However, that's not to say that CAR T cell therapy is without any of its own side effects. The treatment can induce severe and life-threatening toxicities like cytokine release syndrome, which happens when the immune system releases too many cytokines into the bloodstream. The treatment can also damage the nervous system and cause confusion, seizures, and paralysis. Rutgers Cancer Institute estimates that up to 90% of patients experience symptoms, but for most it feels like a bad case of flu and resolves in a week. Within that short time, it's possible that as they're experiencing negative side effects, the therapy is already causing cancer regression.
Meaning there are fewer and fewer cancer cells. Now, how long it takes to eliminate every cancer cell in those instances where it's successful is a bit harder to tell. It may be within a few weeks for some forms of leukemia. We suspect, but we're not sure, that it may take a little longer in some other cancers. There's much more to be learned.
Which isn't a surprising statement, given that Sadolin's been researching this therapy for the last several decades. There's always more tests to run and data to gather, despite his recent award recognition.
The broader public becomes interested in research once it starts reaching a lot of people. We estimate today that about 45,000 and probably more patients have received these cells. So I guess society is starting to take note. But the reality is that the research starts long before And it starts in research centers, usually in medical schools and in universities. And it takes a while until you think you got it right and you can go to clinical trials, which we had to conduct ourselves at our medical centers. As all recipients of this prize today, my co-recipients, Isabelle Rivière, Carl June, and Bruce Levine did. If you were going to bring this to the clinic, you had to do it yourself, because there was no industry at the time that was willing or interested in doing so. So piecing all of this together takes quite a few years.
You can find more information about Dr. Michel Sadelain and all of our guests on our website, ingoodhealthpodcast.org. For more behind the scenes, follow In Good Health Pod on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Our writer-producer is Kristen Farah. Our production manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Greg Johnson.
In Good Health returns in just a moment.
Medical notes this week. A test that could save generations of men. Prostate cancer is one of the leading causes of death in American men, and most cases can only be diagnosed after a biopsy. Luckily, new research in the journal eBiomedicine reveals a new urine test that could significantly reduce the need for these procedures. It detects 3 biomarkers present in prostate tumors and makes an accurate diagnosis even when a blood test comes back normal. Have you gotten your teeth cleaned recently? A new study in the journal Frontiers in Oral Health has revealed that about 1 in 3 adults skipped their dentist appointment in the past year. But it's not just out of laziness. The research reveals that the trend is mostly due to the cost of care and a lack of insurance coverage. These findings suggest that dental care needs to be integrated into overall health care. Have balance issues? It may be your shoes. Difficulty with walking is a top cause of falls, and most solutions involve physical therapy that takes time and money. However, researchers have created a wearable electronic shoe insert that can analyze a user's movement patterns and predict balance issues. It can also pair to other assistive devices to help prevent a fall before an injury occurs. And finally, boredom isn't always a bad thing. A new study in the journal Emotion reveals that feeling bored is actually a psychological signal. It pushes us to seek new experiences that aid in growth, excitement, or just simply create change. The researchers say this evolutionary perspective of boredom helps us understand why people make decisions against their own self-interest. And that's Medical Notes this week. I'm Mayan Vasta Betancourt.
Thank you for joining us this week and every week as we break down the science stories you need to know. You can find all of our past segments and guests on our website, inbetterhealthpodcast.org, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and X for more behind-the-scenes content. Tune in next week for another edition of In Good Health.